Hello everyone, in this video I'll create one integration to import the journals into Oracle ERP. Now first of all we have to download the FBDI template of the journals. So for that I'll search with journals FBDI template and I'll open the first link and I'll click on the go to latest release and then download the XLSM template. So after downloading the template I'll go to show more options and then I'll click on the properties and I'll unblock this template. So for that we have to check this unblock checkbox and click on apply and OK. Then I'll open this template. Now I'll click on the enable content. Now I'll go to the left side. Now we have to first create the source data file. So for that I'll copy the mandatory columns from the status code to actual flag along with the data of the first row. Now I'll open the Notepad++ and paste this data to create our source data file. Now we have to remove all this star. So for that I'll select the star and press Ctrl F and go to replace and replace this star with null and click on replace all and close. Now all the stars are removed. Now we have to put commas between all these fields. So for that I'll select the space between any two fields and press Ctrl F. Now I'll go to replace option again and I'll replace with comma and click on replace all and close. Now you can see the commas between any two columns. Now I'll validate the data. Status code is new. Ledger ID I'll keep it blank. I'll provide this in the integration. Now for the effective date of transaction I'll provide 31st August 2025. Now for journal source and journal category, I can use both as balance transfer. Now how you will find this journal source and journal category? For this, you have to log into Oracle ERP. So we are in the Oracle ERP homepage. Now you have to click on the settings and actions, which is in the top right corner, and click on setup and maintenance. Now go to task and click on search. Now here search with manage journals and enter. So you can see a lot of options are there. So we need to see the journal sources and journal category. So I'll click on journal sources and here you can find a lot of journal sources. So in my case I am using the journal source as balance transfer. I'll cancel and now I'll see the journal categories. So similar to journal sources, you can see a lot of journal categories as well. So for the category, I am also using the balance transfer. Now after the journal source and journal category, we have to provide the currency code that I'll use USD. Now for the journal entry creation date, I'll use the date same as date of transaction, which is 31st August 2025. Now here you have to make sure that the date that you are choosing should be a open period date. Now actual flag will be A. Now after these fields, we have to provide all the segments values. So in the template, you can see there are a lot of segments, but how many segments are required for us, that we have to find out. For that, again, I'll go to ERP. I'll click on the navigator and I'll go down. And here you can find general accounting. Just expand that and click on the journals. Now go to task and click on create journal. Now go down and under the journal lines you can find account. So in the account put any number and press tab button. So here you can find we have 6 segments which are company, line of business, account, cost center, product and intercompany. Now in your cases it can be any number of segments. You have to just come to this page and find out your segments. And based on that you have to provide the data. So as we have 6 segments, so I'll go to the template and copy segment 1 to segment 6. And after the actual flag, I'll paste this. Now, apart from the segments, we also need debit and credit amount. So I'll go right. So here you can see we have enter debit amount and enter credit amount, which are required to create any journal lines. So I'll copy these two columns and I'll paste it in our source data file. Now again, I'll replace the space between two columns with commas. So we put the commas between any two columns. Now I'll provide the data of all these segments and debit and credit amount. So to get the segment data, again we have to go to ERP and we can find the segment data from here. Like if you click on the down arrow of the company, then you can find all the valid value for this segment 1. So you can do this for all these segments. Like for line of business, we can click on this down arrow and we can see all these values. We can pick any values. Likewise, for all the 4 segments, we'll pick up any values and we'll use this set of values in our segments. So I'll just copy these values and use in our source data file. So I put the values of all the segments. Now I'll provide the debit and credit amount. So first of all, I'll provide the debit amount as 1000 and credit amount as 0. So make sure for any particular journal line, it will be either debit line or credit line. So if you are putting any amount in the debit amount column, then the credit amount will be 0 and vice versa. Now this is our debit line. So that is why I am putting the debit amount as 1000. Now I'll copy this line and paste this line in the third row. Now I want to make this as credit line. So I'll put 1000 as the credit amount and 0 as the debit amount. And for the segment, I'll use different segment 3. So now I'll use 11102. And rest of the fields will be as it is. Now our source data file is ready. Now I'll save this. In the save as type, I'll choose all types and I'll provide the name as journal_data.csv. Now I'll go to template. Now I'll remove all the sample data from the template. Now I'll create our FBDI file format. So for that, first of all, I'll copy the header and paste it in the first row. Now I'll go to instruction and CSV generation tab and I will generate the CSV file. That CSV file will be our FBDI CSV file. Now I'll click on the generate CSV file. Now I'll click on save and click on OK. Now you can see the GL interface zip file is created. So I'll extract this zip file. Now I'll go to GL interface folder and this is our FBDI CSV file format. So I'll open this file and you can see the header is there in the file. Now I'll go to SFTP and I will upload our source data file in one of the SFTP folder, which is journal_data.csv. Now I'll go to OIC and create our integration. And for this integration, we need 3 connections, which are ERP Cloud, FTP and REST, which are already there. If you want to know how to create these connections, you can refer my earlier videos in the OIC playlist. You will find the playlist in the description. Now in the integration page, I'll click on the create button and create the application integration. I'll provide the name as intg016 as it is our 16th integration. Now I'll click on create. So first of all, I'll search with REST trigger connection and select the REST 001. Now I'll provide the name as request. Continue. I'll provide slash in the endpoints relative resource URI. I'll choose the action as post. And for the request payload, I'll check this checkbox of configure a request payload. Now I'll click on continue and I'll go down and I'll click on the inline options. Here we have to provide all the attributes of the request payload. Now here I have provided 3 attributes which are file path, file name and primary ledger. So file path is nothing but our SFTP location where our source data file is placed, and file name is our source data file name, and primary ledger will be used to get the ledger ID, as the ledger ID is mandatory to create any journal. And if I open our source data file, then you can see here we have to provide the ledger ID. So in the data file it is null because we'll get the ledger ID for a particular primary ledger, and that ledger ID we'll use for our FBDI file. Now how we'll get the ledger ID from a primary ledger, that we'll see soon. Now I'll continue. So we are getting some error because of in the primary ledger for the value the quotation is missing. So I'll put the quotation and I'll continue. Now continue and finish. Now I'll create one scope, and within that scope I'll put all our actions. So if any error is occurred, then scope will handle that error and will send the notification of the error details. So I'll click on this plus and search with scope. Now within this scope, first of all we'll read the source data file. So for that I'll search with FTP adapter connection, which is FTP001, and provide the name as read source file. Continue. Now we'll use the select operation as read a file, and for the input directory I'll provide slash, and for the file name I'll provide star. These are dummy values. I'll provide the actual values in the mapping. Now I'll continue. Now to read the file we have to upload the structure of the source data file. So I'll continue, and then I'll upload the source data file here. So journal underscore data is our source data file. I'll choose the file. Now I'll provide the record name as R, record set name as RS. And first of all, I'll make all the columns as optional, and then I'll choose one column as mandatory, and then continue, finish. Now I'll go to the map of read source file and expand the file read request. Here we have to provide the file name and directory. So both file name and directory I'll get from the request payload. So for that I will expand this request wrapper, and I'll map file path with directory and file name with file name. Now I'll validate. Now I'll go back. Now after reading the source data file, we have to create our FBDI CSV file, and in that FBDI CSV file we'll write the data from the source data file. So for that I'll click on this plus icon and search with stage file. So I'll choose the stage file action, and I'll provide the name as write journal CSV and continue. Now for the operation we have to choose write file, and for the file name I'll copy the name of GL interface and provide it here with the extension as CSV within quotation, and we have to specify one output directory. So I'll provide slash journal slash output. So this is a directory within OIC, and the same directory we have to use for the properties files and zip file. Now I'll continue. Now we have to provide the structure of the FBDI CSV file as well. So I'll continue, and I'll upload the schema of the FBDI CSV file that we have generated from the journal import template, which is GL interface. So I'll choose this, and for the record name I'll provide W, for the record set I'll provide WS. Now I'll go down and I'll choose all the columns as optional and then one column as mandatory. Now continue. So here we are getting some error because of the star is there in few columns. So we have to remove the star. Now all the stars are removed. Now I'll continue. Now I'll finish. Now I'll go to the map of write journal CSV. Now I'll expand WS and W, and in the sources we'll expand read source file response. So first of all I'll map the repeating element, which is R to W. Then I'll map the fields from the source file to the journal CSV file. So I'll map status code. Ledger ID I'll skip because we have to get the ledger ID from the primary ledger. then that value we'll use in the ledger ID. But apart from that, we'll map all the fields like effective date of transaction, then journal source, journal category, currency code, journal entry creation date, actual flag, then all the segment. Now you can see segment 6 and enter debit amount is appearing as a single field. That means a comma is missing between these two fields. So we have to correct the source data file and we have to re-upload that file. So I'll open the file in Notepad++ and I'll go right and provide the comma between segment 6 and enter debit amount and save this. Now I'll go to SFTP and re-upload the file into the SFTP location. Now I'll go to OIC and close this and edit the read source file and re-upload the file here as well. Again, I'll make all the columns optional and choose the first column as mandatory and finish this. Now I'll map segment 6, then I'll go down and map enter debit and entered credit amount as well. Now I'll validate. Now we have to provide the value of ledger ID, and for that we have to get the ledger ID for a primary ledger which we will pass when we trigger the integration. So I'll go back, then I'll go to Oracle ERP, and first we'll try to find out some valid ledger name. So for that I'll go to settings and actions and click on setup and maintenance. Then I'll go to task and search. Now I'll search with manage primary ledger. So I'll click on the manage primary ledgers, and these are all valid primary ledger. Now here I'll search with US and I'll get one primary ledger which is US primary ledger. So we have to find out the ledger ID for this ledger. Now you can find the ledger ID for any primary ledger using the BIP report query. So I'll click on the navigator and under the tools I'll click on report and analytics. Then I'll go to browse catalog. Now to write the query, you have to create one data model. So I'll click on the create option and then I'll click on data model. Now here I'll click on this new data set and choose SQL query. Now in the name section, I'll put ledger ID query and choose the data source as application db underscore FSCM. Now in the query, we have to write select ledger ID from GL underscore ledgers where name equal to US primary ledger. So GL ledgers is the table where you can find all the primary ledgers with their ledger ID. Now I'll click on OK. Now go to the data and click on view. Now you can see we are getting the ledger ID for US primary ledger. Now I'll go to OIC again and I'll go back. And now I'll create a lookup where I will store the primary ledger and the ledger ID. And in the integration, I'll use that lookup to get the ledger ID for any primary ledger. So I'll click on the lookups. Then I'll click on the create button to create the lookup. I'll provide the name as LKP001 and choose the create option. Now I'll click on the domain name 1 and choose edit domain name. Here I'll provide primary underscore ledger name and click on OK. And in the domain name 2, I'll choose edit domain name and provide ledger ID. Now I'll click on OK. Now in this lookup, you can store all your primary ledgers with their ledger ID. To get the ledger ID, you have to use this BIP report query, which is select ledger ID from GL ledgers where name equal to, then you have to put your ledger name. I'll copy the primary ledger name US primary ledger and put it here. And the ledger ID I'll copy from here and put under the ledger ID. So for now we have only one ledger, but here we can store multiple ledgers with their ledger ID. Now I'll save this. Now I'll go back and go to the integration. And now I'll create one assign action, and in that I'll create a variable to store the ledger ID. So I'll click on this plus and search for assign. Now I'll create a variable and provide the variable name as v underscore ledger ID. Now in the value, I'll find the ledger ID from the lookup. So for this, we have to go to functions and search for lookup. So you can see the function lookup value. We have to drag this lookup value here. Before that, we have to click on the switch to developer view, and then we can drag the lookup value. And now you can see lookup 001, which is our lookup. So I'll select this and click on this right arrow, which is next option. Now you have to select the source, which is primary ledger name, and target will be ledger ID. Now click on next, next, and done. Now here we have to pass the value of the primary ledger that we can pass to the SRC value placeholder. For this, I'll go to input sources and I'll expand the request wrapper, and here you can see primary ledger, and in this primary ledger we'll get the value when we will trigger the integration. Now that we have to pass to the lookup to get the ledger ID. So I'll drag this to the SRC value placeholder. Now it is done. We can save it. Now we have to create the properties file that will be used to trigger the import journals ESS job to create the journal. And for this we have to go to ERP, and under settings and actions we'll click on setup and maintenance. Then I'll choose task and go to search. Then I'll search with manage enterprise and enter. Now I'll click on the manage enterprise scheduler job definition and job set for financial, supply chain and related applications, and search with the ESS job of importing the journals, which is import journals, and enter. So you have to choose the second ESS jobs, which is import journals. Now I'll click on edit option. Now we can see the job definition name is journal import launcher, and this is the job package name. So I'll store these values in variables. So I'll go to OIC, and in the assign action I'll create a variable, and I'll provide the name of the variable as v job definition name, and copy the job definition name from here and put it in the value section. Then I'll create one more variable, which is v job package name, and I'll copy the path and provide it here. Now I'll go down, and these are the parameters of import journal ESS job. So here we need 7 parameters till import descriptive flex fields. After that, all the parameters are repetitive. Now our first parameter is data access set ID, and for this we'll create a variable and provide the name as v data access set ID. Now to get the data access set ID for some particular primary ledger, we need one BIP query. So I'll go to the data model section and I'll edit the previous data set. Now here, instead of GL ledgers, we'll use the table GL access sets to find out the access set ID, and instead of ledger ID we'll put star. Now click on OK. Now view, click on table view, and you can see this is the access set ID. So now I'll copy this and I'll put that ID in the lookup that we have created. So I'll save this. Now go to the lookup and edit the lookup. Now here I will add one column and edit the column name as access set ID and provide the value here. Now save this. Save the changes. Now I'll go to integration and edit the integration. Now go to the assign action again, and now under the data access set ID variable we'll get the value from the lookup. So I'll go to functions, search with the lookup, switch to developer mode and drag it here, and select the lookup 001. Next, here select the source as primary ledger and target as access set ID. Now next, next, and done. Now go to input sources, and in the source value placeholder we have to provide the primary ledger. So I'll put the primary ledger here. Now click on the switch to designer view and save it. Now I'll go to the ERP to see all the parameters. So you can see the second parameter is source, which is the journal source, and that we can get from the FBDI CSV file. Next is ledger ID, and for the ledger ID we already created one variable. Next is group ID, and the group ID field is a number, and that will work exactly same as batch ID. So in the FBDI CSV file, we have to provide group ID, and based on that group ID, the import journal ESS job will get the journal lines from the interface. So we have to provide the same group ID in the properties file as well. Now for the group ID, we'll generate some random number, and that number we'll use in the FBDI CSV and properties file. And to generate the random number, we'll use a JavaScript function. So you can see this is our JavaScript function getRandomNumber that will be used to get a random number. And here we are using Math.random function asterisk 1000. So that will get us the random number between 0 to 999. And then we are using Math.floor function to truncate the values after decimal point, and then we are using +1 so that we'll get the random numbers between 1 to 1000 so that we can avoid the 0. Now I'll provide this piece of code in the description. You can just copy the code and put it in a notepad file and create one JavaScript file whose extension is .js. Now I'll go to OIC. I'll save this integration and go back. Now to attach the JavaScript function, we have to go to libraries and click on the import option. Then I'll click on drag and drop and choose the JavaScript file. I'll provide the name as random_number and click on import. So you can see it was created successfully. Now we have to choose the function within that JavaScript file. So I'll check this JavaScript function, and we have no input, but we have one output that should be a number. So instead of string, we'll choose number here, and I'll save. Now I'll go back and go to the integration. I'll edit the integration, and now before the assign, I'll add one JavaScript action to get the random number. So I'll search with JavaScript and I'll choose the JavaScript action. I'll click on the function, and here I'll choose our function which is getRandomNumber, and I'll save. Now I'll go to the assign action, edit it, and I'll create one variable that will store the group ID. So I'll provide v_group ID, and the value I'll get from the JavaScript function. So I'll expand the JavaScript, and before that I'll go to functions and search for round function, because in that number that we'll get from the JavaScript function, we'll find decimal point, and after the decimal point we'll get 0. So we have to truncate that decimal point with 0. So that is why you are using the round function. So I'll drag the round function here, and in place of number I'll provide the output_JavaScript. Now before save, you have to click on this switch to designer view, else you may get error. So I'll click on this switch to designer view, and then I'll save. Now it is done. Now again I'll go to the parameter section, and the 5th, 6th and 7th parameters are post accounts error to suspense, create summary journals, import descriptive flex fields. So for all these parameters, I will pass the value as n, which is no. So I will not create any variable for these 3 parameters. Now we have to create the properties file. So I'll go to Notepad++, and you can see for the properties file, we have to provide these fields. First, job package name, then comma job definition name, comma zip file prefix, then all the 7 parameters. So total 3 plus 7, 10 fields will be there. And now I'll save this and provide the name as job details dot properties and choose all types. Now I'll save this. Now I'll go to OIC, and after the write journal CSV, I'll click on the plus and search for stage file. I'll provide the name as write journal properties. Continue. Now I'll choose the option write file. The file name I'll provide as job details.properties, and for the output directory we have to provide the same directory that we have used for the journal CSV file, which is journal output. Now continue, and here we have to upload the property file schema. So I'll upload the properties file that we just created. Provide the record name and record set name. Then I'll make all the column optional and choose the first column as mandatory and continue, finish. Now I'll go to the map of write journal properties. And now for the job package and job definition name, I'll get the values from the variables. So I'll map v job definition name to job definition name, v job package name to job package name. For the zip file prefix, I'll create the target node, and here I'll provide the zip file name, which will be glinterface.zip. Save it. For the data access set ID, ledger ID and group ID, we have stored these values in variables. So I'll map v data access set ID to data access set ID, then v ledger ID to ledger ID, and v group ID to group ID. And for the last three parameters, we'll pass the value as n. So I'll just create target node and pass n. And I'll repeat the same for the last two parameters. Now it is done. Now one field is left, which is journal source. So for the journal source, we have to get the value from the source file. So for that, I will expand the read source file response. And here I will expand the repeating element, and you can see the journal source. So I'll map this journal source to the journal source. Now in the source data file, we have multiple journal lines, and that is why we get same journal source multiple times. But here we need only one value of journal source. So that is why after the repeating element r, we'll put a square bracket, and in the square bracket I'll provide 1. That means we'll get the journal source of the first line only. Now I'll save. Now validate this. Now some mapping is left in the right journal CSV. So I'll edit this. First of all, ledger ID is left. So for the ledger ID, we have the variable v ledger ID. So I'll map v ledger ID to the ledger ID. And one more thing, here we have to pass the group ID as well. So for that, I will go down, and you can find the field interface group identifier. So this is nothing but group ID. So you have to map v group ID to the interface group identifier. So we are passing the same group ID to the CSV file and the properties file. That means whatever the lines are there in the CSV file, the import journals will get only those lines using the group ID mentioned in the properties file. Now validate. Now we have to create the zip file using the FBDI CSV and properties file. So I'll click on this plus and search for stage file. And I'll provide the name as write journal zip. I'll continue. Now the operation that I'll choose is zip files. And we have to provide the zip file name as glinterface.zip. And the input directory, we have to provide the journal/output. And for the output directory, I'll provide journal/zip. Now I'll continue. You can see the file name and input directory is correct. Now finish. Now we have to upload this zip file into the Oracle ERP to create the journals. So for this, we have to use the Oracle Cloud ERP adapter connection. So I'll search for ERP, and I'll choose the connection ERP Cloud 001. And I'll provide the name as import journal to ERP. I'll continue. And we have to choose the second option, which is import bulk data into Oracle ERP Cloud. Continue. Now search with import journals and select import journals. Now continue. Now enable the callback checkbox. Continue. Finish. Now go to the map of import journal to ERP. Expand import bulk data. Expand the ICS file. And in the sources, expand the write journal zip response. And from the ICS file, map the file reference to file reference. And now expand the properties in both source and target, and map the file name to file name. Now validate. Now we have to add one fault handler. For that, click on the three dot of the scope and choose the fault handler and default handler. And in the fault handler, I'll add one notification action. So if anything goes wrong, the fault handler will handle that and send the notification with the error details. So I'll click on the plus icon and search for notification. So you can see we have created three parameters, which are error region, error code, and error details. And I am using the error code, region, and details from the fault handler in those parameters. And then in the body, I'm putting please find the below error details, and then I'm providing the error code, error region, and error details. Now I'll save this. Now the last thing is we have to add one primary business identifier that I'll provide primary ledger. Now I'll save. Now the integration is completed. Now I'll create the callback integration. I'll provide the name of the callback integration as intg017 and create. Now as you know that in the callback integration, the trigger will be ERP Cloud Adapter connection. So make sure that your Oracle ERP Cloud Adapter trigger connection is both trigger and invoke connection so that you can use that in both the integration. Now I'll choose this connection ERP Cloud 001 and provide the name as get journal callback. Continue. Now you have to choose the second option, receive callback message, and I'll go down and search with import journals and select it. Then I'll continue and I'll finish. Now I'll add one notification action to send the zip file that I'll get from the callback. Now you can see in the notification I have provided the from email subject, and in the body I have written please find the attached file for journal callback. And for the file I'll click on the plus under attachment and I'll expand the ERP import bulk data event. And under the ICS file I can see the file reference. Now the file reference is referring the zip file for the callback. So I'll drag this file reference here. Now I'll save this. Now we'll add one primary business identifier that I'll add summary status. Now I'll save. Now I'll go back and activate both the integration in debug mode. Now I'll run the main integration and I'll go to body, and here I'll provide the primary ledger name, which is US primary ledger, and from the SFTP I'll get the file path and put it for the file path. Then I'll copy the file name and paste it here. Now I'll click on run option. Now I'll go down and I can see the integration is completed, and now I'll get the process ID. You can see this is the process ID for load interface file for import. Now I'll go to Oracle ERP and under the navigator I'll click on schedule processes. So if you note down the process ID, which is 8338725, and you can see the same process ID is there 8338725 for the load interface file for import, and I can see it is succeeded because it triggered two more child process, which are load file to interface and transfer file, which are also succeeded. Now after the load interface file for import is succeeded, the data is loaded into the interface, and then the ESS job import journals was triggered to create the journals in ERP, which is also succeeded, and it called one child jobs, which is import journals child. Now the import journals is dependent on the import journals child. As the import journals child is succeeded, so that is why import journals is also succeeded. Now I'll select the import journals child, and here under the attachment I'll click on one more. So you can see one text file is there. So this is nothing but the result file of our import journals. So I'll download this. Now I'll open this in Notepad++. And you can see status is success. Group ID is a random number that is generated by the JavaScript function, and which is 110. And we can see the total lines are 2 and both the lines are imported successfully. As we can see that the flex errors and non-flex errors are 0. Now this is the batch name that is created for these journal lines, and you can see the debit amount is 1000, credit is also 1000. Now to get the journal details, we have to search this batch in Oracle ERP. So I'll click on the navigator, and then under the general accounting I'll click on the journals, I'll click on task and click on manage journals. Now I'll copy this batch name and paste it in the journal batch. Now I'll search. We are not getting any data because we have to change the data access set. So here we have to choose our primary ledger, which is US primary ledger. So this is US primary ledger. So I'll select it and click on OK. Now I'll paste the journal batch again and I'll search. Now you can see we are getting the journal batch. I'll click on the journal. You can see this is our journal details. So the name of the journal that is created is balance transfer. And you can see this is the accounting date 31st August 2025. Currency USD US dollar. And if you go down, you can find that in that journal, two lines are there. And if you remember, these are the two lines that we provided in our source data file. And the debit amount is 1000 and credit amount is 1000 as well. And these are the details of segments of the debit line and credit line. Now I'll check the email to get the callback file. So you can see we are getting one email. The subject is journal callback file and this is our file. So I'll download this and now I'll rename this file and provide the extension in this file which is .zip. Now I'll extract it and here you can find the log files of all the ESS jobs starting from load interface file for import to import journals child job. Now if you open the last log file, now this is the result file of import journals that we also downloaded earlier. Now apart from these log files, you can see the FBDI CSV file and properties file is also there within this zip file. So this is it for this video. If you like this video, please hit the like button. Share this video within your circle. If you have any doubts or any suggestion, put that in the comment section and do subscribe our channel.